Good evening, everybody. Welcome back, Spartan Nation. We now bring in Jonathan Shop. He is Spartan Nation senior writer. He's been with us for so many years. He joins us each and every week. We talk about the state of Michigan State athletics. We're going to do two segments today. One segment on football, one segment on basketball. John, let's start. Mel Tucker comes in. Bill Beekman gave him a huge bank account for assistants. He's one of the top 12 paid coaches in America and one of the top 12 budgets for offensive assistants. They've given him all the tools. Now he has very bare cupboards. There have been several recruiting misses in a row. So it's not like he's getting a roster full of talent. I have said to multiple people, if he somehow gets this team to a bowl next year, because I did not expect Michigan State to even sniff a bowl next year with D'Antonio. If he's able to get this team to a bowl, it was a great coaching job. Your thoughts?
Well, I think that as we usually see in a transition like this, we're going to find some talent that maybe was hidden that we didn't realize was quite as good. And
Oh, hold on, John. John, we lost you for a minute. It sounded like you went in the closet. Go ahead.
I know, it's crazy. I think we're going to find some talent that wasn't expected, some talent that was undiscovered and ends up developing and blossoming, if you will, over the next couple of years, like we do at any time there's a transition. And you may also find some that really just is not going to be able to produce anything on a field during a game. You've got a really interesting schedule that is jam-packed kind of throughout until the final 2 weeks this year. So it's going to be interesting really quickly because you're going to start with Northwestern with all the hype and excitement for the new coach, the new schemes, etc. And it doesn't get really easy when you make a long trip to BYU the next week before returning home for a couple games and then going to Iowa. So it gets rolling pretty quickly. I'm very interested to see what they do discover and find. I am a little more optimistic on the level of talent that's around and the first-year bump, if you will, that almost every single first-year coach gets from the roster that he inherits. I think that happens on a regular basis across the country because people pay more attention than they would otherwise, and maybe there's a little more excitement or a different excitement anytime there's a new staff in place. So they got a lot of work cut out for them. But as we talked about before, I think the most important hiring is the one relative to the offensive line, and that horse is in the barn, if you will. I think the next most interesting hire is the strength coordinator. And I call that position a coordinator like Mark D'Antonio used to because the strength and conditioning coach spends so much time with the players, and we haven't seen a different strength and conditioning coach around Spartan football for 25 years. So that is the next major hire I'm keeping my eye out for.
John, I want to ask you about Mel Tucker, and I know there isn't a lot for you to comment on about him personally, but what I want to dig into is this. Do you like how he's handling the transition? He's got his nose to the grindstone. He's recruiting. He's trying to hire staff. He hasn't done a ton of media, which I have no problem with because he's just got a lot to fix quick. How do you like how he's handled the transition here at first? I think he's done great.
Yeah, my impression is that he kind of had an idea of what he was up to because he had just gone through a transition last year at Colorado. So he was doing it in a much different time schedule than starting in February. So I like what he's done so far. I expected that we may see a mix of old familiar names that maybe haven't been around Michigan State for a while, possibly some holdovers from the D'Antonio staff, even if just for a season, and then some new names as well as maybe some names from his brief stint in Colorado. If you look at where some of these folks have come from, there's a good bit to get excited about. There's also a little bit of familiarity here and there when you see, oh, this guy spent a little time in Minnesota. Well, hey, look, this guy, was with Mel Tucker here or there. So I actually think he's done a pretty good job so far. There's plenty of time for media. There'll be plenty of downtime, those periods of recruiting where they're limited in what they can do. Job one is to take care of Spartan football. It's not to sell it for Mel Tucker at this point. So I think he's on the very right track at this point.
Yeah, we're in total agreement. We're talking to Spartan Nation senior writer John Shaw, talking the state of MSU football. John, let's talk about the roster. I know that you say that you think there's a lot there or more there. We know that Devin Thomas was a guy when D'Antonio came in who, boom, shot to the top of the board and was the first wide receiver picked in the next NFL draft. But there have been a lot of misses. There's been a lot of guys that just simply can't play. There's a lot of guys on this roster that I had MAC coaches tell me, what are they thinking taking that guy? There's been some real big swings and misses. I'm curious, in your opinion, how important is the transfer portal to Mel Tucker?
I think it's going to matter a lot when you get into next winter, if you will. I don't know much to expect much from this before 2020. I do think the transfer portal is going to be important to Mel Tucker for his first couple of years at Michigan State. And I also think we're going to see maybe a little bit even more of a Wild Wild West than we've already seen. We don't know exactly what the transfer portal rules are going to look like in a year. I actually think Mark D'Antonio had the best idea I've ever heard about transferring, which is to give everybody a one-time transfer, but force them to redshirt and play a max of 4 games that next season. I actually think that's about as even and as good a deal all the way around as you could get. But you've got this roster now. Here's my concern, Hondo, and where do you think they are the most thin? Because I would present to you, if they've got a real problem, if they've got guys that cannot compete at the point of attack on this team, it will stunt the early success level of Mel Tucker. Because if you cannot compete at the point of attack, especially on the offensive line, you have no chance of competing in the upper half of the Big Ten East.
Well, I'm going to tell you right now, offensive line is the biggest weakness on this team. And it's not
That's
even
not good.
No, and I think there are other places that are weak as well, but offensive line is where it all starts, in my opinion, and it is really, really weak. John, while we're talking football, I don't want to get a ton into D'Antonio. He's gone. But is the Curtis Blackwell lawsuit now becoming a distraction?
I don't think so. It's a little bit odd. You know, it's going to be more interesting to see what happens with the recent evidence that's been presented. I think that'll be more interesting than the actual impact on the case. I'm not sure what impact that evidence or the recent filings is going to have on that specific case. I think the media story or media interest may be more interesting. I do not think it will be a distraction to Michigan State football as they start 2020. I think it's very easy for 105 kids to essentially compartmentalize the fact that this is an issue that happened for most of them before they were even on campus or on Michigan State's radar, and has nothing to do with the 2020 team. So I do think that they've got the opportunity to separate that and push that aside, which circles me back more to, are we looking at a concern on the offensive line of technique, as in coaching and development? Or are we looking at physical challenges, meaning they physically cannot match up or hang with the competition at the top of the Big Ten East? If you're talking about a physical mismatch, I don't think there's a whole lot you can do with that. There's only going to be so much help that can be provided by the new staff that comes in.
John, it's both. The coaching, the offensive line coaching has been terrible. I'm going to tell you a story very quickly. My son and I were with one of the offensive linemen, and he voiced to the two of us how frustrated he was because his high school coach was calling him saying, "Why are you doing that? I taught you better than that." And he said, "Coach, I know, but this is how they want it done." And he said, Go ahead.
I was going to say, so that's going to be out the window quick, correct?
Yes, but now they also then have to get them physically stronger to compete because they wanted the, quote, more athletic, unquote, type. And they've got to get guys who are bigger, faster, stronger, and they got to teach technique better. I mean, the offensive line is so far behind. And I don't think it's because of the kids. Kids can get bigger and stronger if they got work ethic. Kids can play if they have technique. But they're so far behind the 8 ball, man, it's going to be hard to get them ready. I mean, if you think about it, John, we're sitting here in February talking about 7 months.
And I'm looking at the schedule and it gets tough in a hurry and in a row. At Iowa, first Michigan, first Ohio State, at Indiana, first Minnesota, at Penn State. It's possible as we stand here today, they can win 0 of those football games, as we talked about before this change was made and Mark D'Antonio left town. So if you don't think these guys got the work cut out for them, holy moly, they've got their work cut out for them between now and October 3rd when Spartan football goes to Iowa City and plays a competent Iowa Hawkeye team.
John, very quickly, but I said if Mel Tucker gets his team to a bowl game, it's going to be a great coaching job. I know we've already hit it a little bit, but I'm asking you now that we've spent 10 and a half minutes talking about it. If he gets to a bowl game, I don't even care if he wins it. If he goes 6-7, he gets to a bowl game, that has been a very impressive job in year one for Mel Tucker. And I don't mean he can't be impressive and not get to one. But, I mean, that to me is the highest expectation you can have for this team, right or wrong.
Absolutely right. There's 3 games that should be guaranteed wins. The rest are at least up in the air. A bowl would be a humongous accomplishment.
Totally agree. He is the great Spartan Nation senior writer. John, we're going to switch focus to basketball with John Schaap, Spartan Nation senior writer. You are listening to the Spartan Nation Radio Network. Thank you for... Don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere.